So with our first look at new Warhammer 3 battle gameplay, we get to see lots of new stuff. We're going to take a look at said new stuff, as some of it will kind of fly under the radar a bit and you might not notice it, while some of these things are straight up very obvious. But here we go, 5 things that are new in Total War Warhammer 3. So the first new thing is UI changes, which is in fact multiple changes. Starting with the magic meter. No longer is it a ball that fills up with a little meter down the side, it's more of an hourglass vibe now. But does that mean it works differently? No, seemingly not. The description reads pretty much the same I think as what Warhammer 2 says. The reserves are what recharge it, the higher your reserves, the quicker a recharge you get, blah blah blah. So pretty much the same deal, just a different visual representation of it. You've got the reserves at the top, which trickles down into the actual magic pool below. In this demo we had unlimited power reserve, as you can see, but I imagine that was just for this demo. The next UI change is tier markers on the unit card. As seen here, a bronze one indicates a low tier unit, we can assume. A silver diamond shape with a numeral 2 in it is going to be a mid tier unit. And naturally a gold version with a 3 in it is going to be a high tier unit. So now we have some kind of indication of what quality a unit is without having to look at all the stats and figure it out ourselves. This is mostly going to be useful for newer players. I wonder if they'll go back and do this with all the old factions. I assume they will. But it's just a nice aid to help people learn units that little bit quicker. We also have a new way to view abilities on the unit card with a collapsible list. This will be able to show you the full names of the abilities and the percentage that they have if they have one, but most abilities will still require you to mouse over them to see what they actually do. How much use this really is, I don't know. The icons at the bottom always seemed fine to me, didn't really seem like they needed another system for that, but I guess it's nice to have there if you want it. However, one slightly worrying thing that seems to be removed from the unit card that is in Warhammer 2 is that active effects are displayed on the unit card. So let's say you've got a unit of goblins and they're fighting some skeletons and those skeletons have fear, you would then see the fear trait on the goblins unit card to show that they're being affected by it. That seems to have gone away for some reason. Maybe it's just not in this build and it will be in the final one. Let's hope so, because that would be a silly thing to remove, I think. Or maybe just somehow I missed it. And another magic related UI change, we can now see a spell's damage on the tooltip itself. You see this Death Frost ability does 1.8k damage over 27 seconds, so we now get the actual number showing us what kind of damage this spell will be able to do. So this is just a nice touch, gives us that little bit more of information to help us choose our spells and what we want to do with them. So just more information, ultimately giving us more control and understanding over what we're doing. And this last little thing is a little bit speculation. Gold shields. You can see here this unit of Sargard has a gold shield, but it's because I've upgraded them to that gold shield in this new survival mode. So that is not really a legit gold shield, but the fact that they're in the game in some form makes us question whether they'll be in the game permanently in the main factions all the time. Maybe some units which had silver shields will get upgraded to gold shields, which will likely block maybe 85% of missiles, as they did, I think, in Troy. So yeah, not 100% whether that's just for survival mode or whether we will see it in more areas of the game. And the next new thing coming to Warhammer 3 is wounds. Now I know, Zerk, wounds have been around since the dawn of Total War. People get injured all the time. Well, no. It's a new ability for single entity units. Lords, heroes, monsters, even artillery pieces that are single entities will get this permanent hex, which when they drop below 50% of their base health, they will have their damage output and speed reduced. So ultimately, it's going to make single entities less powerful. I'm sure we've all had the experience where we fight a battle, beat the crap out of the enemy army, but then it's just their one strong lord left, or a monster like a dragon or a Kemrian war sphinx, and he's got a lot of health. We forgot to put a lot of damage on him, so he's in good health, and then he wipes out the rest of your army late game because everything's beaten up. And naturally, you have no good way to stop him and pin him down, and it's a very frustrating experience. Well, this seems like it's aimed to stop that a little bit, so lords and monsters won't be so powerful once they've been beaten to half health. So in the late game, it should be a lot harder, or they'll be less effective at soloing the rest of your army. So we'll have to see how that really affects things, especially in multiplayer. Will it make monsters and a lot of single entities less desirable to take? Will people be using more infantry and cavalry as a result? A curious decision nonetheless. What do you make of it? Let me know. New thing number 3 in Warhammer 3 is demons. And I know what you're thinking, Zerk, no shit, there's going to be demons in Warhammer 3. but it's how they work that you don't know. Although technically you kinda do know, because they kinda work the same as undead. As you can see, this demonic trait here, this ability, this unit is demonic, has physical resistance, does not rout, is immune to terror, takes damage when leadership is low. So that's kinda similar to undead, right? Apart from the physical resistance and the immunity to terror, that's basically the undead mechanic. And then you also have the crumbling equivalent, demonic instability, causes damage to them when their leadership is broken. And the equivalent of disintegration, banished. Once they've had their leadership absolutely ravaged and they've shattered, they will rapidly lose health and die. So this ultimately gives us a new kind of opponent to face in Demons. And this will be a kind of new style of faction because they'll have these unroutable units but also these heavily armoured routable units. Other factions in Warhammer 2 don't have that. The undead are of course the unroutable ones. Some factions can kinda do this already with like the Empire. If you bring a front line of flagellants, they're all unbreakable. So you get a mixture of breakable and unbreakable. But with this it's going to be a little bit different. And with all these demons having physical resistances, it's going to put more of an emphasis on bringing magical attacks along to deal with them. We also have to wonder if this demonic trait will be the same for all the different Chaos God factions. Will Nurgle demons have a physical resistance as well, or maybe they'll have that swapped out for poison or something? To be honest, I don't think so. I think demons will be the same on all factions, mostly because that demonic trait is simply just called demonic. There's no relation to Khorne there. It doesn't say Khorne's demonic or demonic Khorne or demon of Khorne. So it seems like demons will be the same across all the Chaos factions, but we'll see. Who knows? Interesting to see though, and nice to have a new type of unit, even though it's not too far from what we already have. It's just something a little bit different to mix the game up a little. New thing number 4 that Sarin Nakatarin is bringing to the table, Ice Magic. The new magic lore for the Kislev army, and I imagine for a bunch of other factions as well. Which Warhammer 2 factions will get this? We have to wonder. A quick run through of the spells and abilities. First off, Katerin has this unique ability, Frostfang, which is exclusive to her. It's a big old explosion that brings forth some icy shards to stab enemies right in their nether regions for a tasty bit of damage. Onto the actual spells, we have Crystal Sanctuary, which gives a 66% damage resistance, but the friendly unit it's been cast on won't be able to move. So a nice protection spell as long as you use it on units that are already fighting so they don't need to move. And then another buff for friendly troops, Frost Blades, increases damage output on base and armor piercing damage and melee attack for 26 seconds. So a nice damage buff to a friendly unit or maybe herself. So a couple of nice support abilities first off for Katerin, and then we have Ice Maiden's Kiss, a damage breath spell. Does some damage with its icy form, but also I think reduces movement speed. It's not quite clear on the unit card, but I think it does that as well. Has a nice big wide arc as you can see, so a decent damage spell there. And then another damage spell, Death Frost. This is a direct damage spell, much like Fate of Yuna perhaps, only usable on one unit, but it does some big damage. 2000 health nearly, so that should be good for whittling down some elite units, perhaps those with a lot of armor. This can freeze their soul, essentially. Then we have Ice Sheet, which reduces speed and charge speed by 48%. That's an AoE as well, so you can get a good few units in that. A nice one for controlling the enemy, and as Kislev are going to have seemingly a heavy reliance on missiles, it's going to buy time for your missiles to land some shots, maximizing ranged damage output. And lastly, in the lore of Ice, we have the Heart of Winter, a direct damage AoE spell that also reduces speed over time. Every 8 seconds the effect gets a bit stronger, as you can see on the unit card there. So going to do some nice damage over time, provided that the units stay in there, I guess. If the units move out of that AoE area, they won't be affected anymore. So good to use on clumps of troops. It will stop them getting away, of course, with the slow as well. But it's a nice damage AoE for those big blobs of troops. So that's all the spells in the lore of Ice. You can check out the Overcast versions here on the tooltips as well if you want to pause and read them. But yeah, some nice new magic to play with. Of course, I imagine there will be other new magic laws as well, perhaps one for each of the Chaos Gods, although I know, maybe not Khorne. And like I said earlier, I wonder what Warhammer 2 factions might get this lore as well. Maybe the Norskans, right, because that kind of makes sense, they're in the icy worlds. Maybe the Dark Elves as well. I also wonder if ice magic will have any interaction with fire magic, or more specifically fire units. Units that do fiery damage. Surely they should be affected by ice magic. Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the fire will be able to take down the ice and just melt it. Who knows? It's probably a bit too complicated to implement, but we'll see. And the last new thing we have for Warhammer 3, deployables. Things that can be laid down on the map to aid you in some way. This is something that's been in pretty much every other Total War, the ability to build barricades and things in sieges at least, to either slow them down or kind of drive them to where you want them to go. We have that in this new survival mode at least, but we have to wonder whether it'll go into all other areas of the game, such as sieges or maybe even open field battles. As you can see here in this survival mode, we can build a barricade as a blocker to slow the enemy down, then they'll have to beat it down to get through it. We can build a platform so that we can put a missile unit up there to blast them and still have a bit of a blocker there, plus it increases their range just a little bit. There's also the monument, which will increase melee attack and leadership of any friendly units fighting near the monument, and the trap, which will reduce enemy speed and melee attack when they run through it or maybe even fight nearby it. So there's these kind of roadblocks that we can throw up, as well as arrow towers that we can build, kind of similar to what we have in sieges, right? But you can choose which one you want. There's a normal one, an armor piercing one, a magic one that reduces speed. So there's different ones you can choose, each with a different cost as well, so you can spend as much as you like, and obviously you'll get a better tower for the money, or the supplies in this case. But yeah, these are a nice new addition to the survival mode and to the game itself, but what I want to know is, are they going to be anywhere else in the game? Is this how they're going to jazz up sieges, by allowing deployables to finally be placed like in every other Total War? Or will there be certain more open field maps like this, where we can deploy stuff which isn't an invasion into the Chaos Realms like this survival mode is? Many questions. But it's nice to see this kind of deployable coming in to Total War Warhammer, because personally I am a fan of deployables. I like the strategic placement of equipment to aid you in your cause. To be honest though, I think we'll probably only see them in these kind of survival maps, the long runs of going through checkpoints. I doubt they'll make it into sieges, just because then they'd have to change every single siege map that already exists. So maybe that's more work than we can hope for. Maybe sieges are what they are in Warhammer and there isn't much hope for them. So I'd love to see them in sieges, but I doubt we will, unfortunately. Either way though, we are getting this mode instead though. This new survival based, wave based thing, kind of attack and defend. I do enjoy that kind of thing myself, so I'm quite the fan of it, but how much of a fan of it I'll be after doing 50 of them, I'm not sure. We'll have to see. But deployables making their way into Total War Warhammer, but how far and how deep into the game do they go? So there we go. 5 new things in Warhammer 3. What do you reckon? Anything you like, anything you don't like? Of course, do remember that this was a very early access build, so some things you see here might be subject to change. But we've got a few nice quality of life improvements and some new stuff to play with, but we'll have to see how it all turns out in the final product. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the future.